Tonight on Dispatches, the extraordinary story of the police forces who have been cheating the public. From unpublished files and the evidence of senior officers, we reveal how cops and robbers connived to serve their own interests and defeat justice in the crime game.
It's every householder's nightmare, your home violated by an intruder.
It's very unnerving to know that you've been burgled. Everything seems dirty, you want to go around cleaning everything. You don't feel secure for some time afterwards.
When you've been burgled, your wife is all upset and for a few days of turmoil if someone's been in your house and disturbed your privacy.
If it happens, you turn to the police. You want your stolen property back. You want the criminal punished. You want justice. But you can't guarantee you'll get any of those. We've obtained an astonishing and until now secret report from one of Britain's most successful forces. It reveals how the police made thousands of crimes disappear, blamed others on the wrong people, and cheated the victims of justice.
The public who believe that they're getting a service and are paying for that service are actually being cheated. And they've been cheated by the very people that they rely upon to set the standards of honesty and decency in life in general.
Look at the police, please.
As a senior detective, Peter Coles has headed serious crime units, arrested over 100 murderers and sent a terrorist gang to prison. But his last act as a policeman was to point the finger at his own bosses over their crime figures.
A culture has spread through virtually every police force in the country where they are quite happy to fiddle the figures.
The police don't want lumbering with a whole load of undetected crime, because at the end of the year it'll make the performance look not quite as good as perhaps they're required to make it.
So they hide them?
So they hide them, cuff them.
I don't think any chief officer can afford to be complacent about that. I couldn't, as I left South Yorkshire, sitting and remembering the 43 chief constables that used to sit around a table once every 6 weeks, full of integrity, and I can't think of a single one of those that could afford to say, well, it doesn't go on in my force.
Tonight we throw the spotlight on the hidden world of the crime game, where the police and the criminals are on the same team and always come out winners, while thousands of ordinary people are condemned to lose. People like Trish Prescott from Nottingham.
We'd gone away to Wales and we got a phone call from our lodger saying that we'd been broken into. The police came round, took a list of what had gone missing, and just left it at that. Nobody was caught at the time. And then some months later we got a letter saying that somebody had admitted to the burglary, but there was nothing they could do about getting the stuff back.
So far, so predictable. A routine, if upsetting crime, solved by solid police work. But we were able to investigate the crime again, using police files, and we discovered that the confession which solved the burglary was full of holes. Exhibit 1, a stolen computer.
The person who stole the goods reckoned that he took a computer and we didn't possess one at the time.
Exhibit 2, a wad of cash.
He also said he took £400 in cash, and it was certainly less than £100 that he took.
Well, there can't be any doubt about how he broke in, can there?
He says that he broke into the house at night time, but the lodger who lives here came home in the evening, early evening, and it had already happened, so it must have happened during the day.
Is that all?
And he also said that he came in through the conservatory, and nobody's ever got in through our conservatory. He actually broke in through the French doors over here.
The confession which supposedly solved Trish's burglary could never have been written by the real thief. So why were the police so easily satisfied by this dodgy admission?
The fact is that Trish Prescott was a victim twice over. First of a burglary and then of a trick, one that's been played on the victims of crime up and down the country, not by the criminals, but by the police.
The crime game is probably the best kept secret in the criminal justice system, a devious means for police to pretend to be more successful than they are. It's fatally flawed by the fact that it allows criminals to escape unpunished and victims to be deprived of justice. The game is played in two halves. In the first half, the object is to cheat the system for recording crime, so that it looks as though villains are committing fewer offences.
Where there had been an attempted breaking on a garden shed, it might be reduced to criminal damage to the shed, or where a windscreen had been shattered by vandalism on a motor car, somehow it became perhaps a stone thrown up by a passing car. Simply to make it more convenient for the matter to be downgraded. And this process called cuffing of crime, where crimes were allowed to disappear up a policeman's cuff, were known across the country.
It was happening more and more and more, and in more serious crimes, because thefts are one thing, but it was happening in robberies, street robberies and things like that, so it was happening across the board.
The crime game has the strangest rules. To you or me, this incident can be only one thing: a theft. The young woman, the victim of a purse snatcher. But to a police officer who wants to make the crime figures improve, it can be recorded as something minor, not a crime at all. The woman lost her purse, so why not call it a case of lost property? Some things have to be recorded as crimes, others do not. If you've told the police that someone tried to break into your car, they may have cuffed that by logging it as vehicle interference, not a recordable crime. Or if someone tries to break into your house, the police can record that as minor damage, and another crime fails to make the force statistics. Up and down the country, police have cuffed tens of thousands of offences in this way. The second half of the game is equally simple. Officers pretend to have solved crimes when in fact they haven't. Their main tactic is known as a write-off. All the police need is a young criminal who's willing to play along with them. We know from the police's own files that young Kevin was one of them. Kevin was in prison when two detectives came and offered him a deal. They would give him a couple of days out of his cell to visit places where cars had been stolen. He would admit stealing the cars on a promise that he would not be prosecuted.
We got back to the police station, treated me to a McDonald's, and came to the cell and took me to an interview room with a file. They want you to have a look through it. Like, I picked out 10, 15 cars maybe, which I had took. And it says, right, it says, there's a lot of other cars in there, could you do us a favour and just admit to cars you haven't took, just to clear it up for us.
Yeah.
It says it's been worth our while then fetching you, and it's been worth your while to come out of prison for a couple of days.
Right.
So I agreed to it.
But you know at that stage that you're confessing to stealing cars that you've never seen in your life.
Yeah.
And they knew that you were doing that too.
Obviously.
So how many cars did you confess to stealing where you hadn't actually stolen them on that occasion?
That's 60, 70 cars.
60, 70 cars. So that's 60 or 70 car owners who think that the thief's been caught.
When actually he hasn't, no.
Ah.
It's still at large taking somebody else's.
Just as the police had promised, Kevin was never punished for any of this. In fact, he was rewarded for his so-called crimes, as the police had made clear when they had first come to his prison cell.
I asked him what would be in it for me. He says, oh, we can take you to see your parents, we'll take you to see a couple of close friends and your girlfriend. Yeah. So I then agreed to it.
Did they let you on your own with your girlfriend?
They gave me like 10, 15 minutes in another room where he sat in the kitchen.
And Kevin wasn't the only criminal to do well out of this round of the crime game.
If my friends had been charged with something and they were still on bail for it, I admitted to their charges, so obviously they'd get off with it because I've already admitted to it. They can't do two people for the same offence, can they?
And your friends walked away? They
They got a case for out of court.
In the crime game, it just doesn't matter if the criminals get away with their crimes, because the only thing that matters is that the police can chalk up plenty of detections. The detections don't have to be genuine, and indeed the really clever players will go one step further and claim to have detected offences which, so far as other people are concerned, have never been committed at all.
According to leaked police records, a burglar tried to break into every single garden shed on one side of this Nottinghamshire street in a single night. They say he failed with all 33 of them, but that he then came back the next night and tried and failed to burgle the same 33 sheds all over again. The good news is that the local police say they got someone to confess to all 66 crimes. Meet William, the self-confessed crime wave of the Crescent, according to police record.
So you understand the police are saying that you came down here and robbed, or tried to rob, all these garden sheds?
Yeah, I understand that.
Did you do it?
No, no way.
So like, here's this garden shed, number 59. According to this report, you tried to burgle it.
No way, no.
But not once, but twice. The next night you came back and tried the same thing.
No, no.
You
Sorry.
sure?
I'm positive. No way, no, honestly.
Because let me just tell you, there's an official police report that quotes you saying, in fact, we did every shed on this road. We did it on 2 nights.
Utter rubbish, utter rubbish.
Could it be? We went off to check on this, and at every door we tried, we got the same answer. Not only did the alleged criminal deny committing the crimes, but his supposed victims don't believe any of this happened at all.
We're looking at burglaries and attempted burglaries that have happened in the street. Do you remember somebody trying to break into your garden shed?
No.
And you might remember because it's supposed to have happened two nights running,
No.
one after the other. And you never had a policeman come to you and say, oh, well, we've had somebody admit that they did this crime, so that's good news.
No.
What do you think about that then?
I think it's too much down to a porcupine.
Okay, well, I'll go and have a word with the neighbours and see if they remember anything.
I can't understand why should they say this when we've not had no trouble. I mean, I've lived here 50 years and I know everybody in the whole circle. And anything that goes wrong anywhere, any illness, bad illness, deaths, burglary especially, we'd know.
Why would the police spend their valuable time clearing up crimes that no one else has heard of? The answer lies in the crime statistics. There are 2 ways to score points in the crime game. First, by making crimes disappear, and then by clocking up detections, real or imaginary. The important thing for the police is to deliver the figures which will make their force look good. During the last decade, crime figures have become one of the key games in British political life, and the politicians want results from the police.
Crime started to rise again. It's still far too high.
We've inherited
A dramatic fall in
burglary, car crime,
police deserve to be congratulated on
law and order.
In 1992, the Conservative government announced that police forces would be measured on performance, and the results published as league tables.
You will be able to see what I think is hugely interesting to the public. What is the detection rate, the clear-up rate in one particular police force compared with another?
Ever since, forces have been ranked on success, particularly on key crimes like burglary, car theft and violence. But this system has given police an incentive to fake the figures. Those who know the police say the game of manipulating the numbers is being played on a vast scale. Gary Mason edits Police Review. He talks to police officers every day of his working life.
It could be as many as 2/3, perhaps 3/4 of forces which actually do have some degree of abuse when it comes to making the crime figures look better. I mean, some of the forces may suffer abuse to a far greater degree than others, but in terms of actual happenings, then it could be as high as that in terms of the number of forces.
In private, many officers talk about this fiddling. In public, only a few will do so. One of them is Richard Wells, recently retired as Chief Constable of South Yorkshire.
The difficulty with fiddling figures, whoever does it, is everybody's cheated, and it's absolutely pointless. The member of the public is cheated in one direction or another, either because the crime is cleared up when it's not, or is not cleared up when it should be. The officer's cheating himself or herself, the chief constable is cheated, those people responsible for the governance of the country are cheated, and to what benefit?
The temptation to get to the top of the table has been too great for officers in many forces. In the West Midlands, detectives have been disciplined for fiddling figures. Forces such as Lincolnshire and Devon and Cornwall have succeeded in the tables, only to have officers caught out cheating. Yet only a small number of usually low-level officers have been caught out. Until now.
We found some powerful evidence of abuse when we got hold of this secret police report. It was produced by one police force, Bedfordshire, who spent 18 months investigating the crime game in action in another force, Nottinghamshire. They found that Nott's officers had engaged in systematic malpractice.
Through the mid-1990s, junior officers in Nottinghamshire, like officers in other forces, were being driven by their commanders to produce better and better figures. Bedfordshire found that under this pressure, Nott's officers had resorted to malpractice to create a mass of detections, while numerous real crimes had simply vanished from official records.
Did they conclude that your officers had misrecorded thousands of crimes?
There had been some misrecording of some offences, but based upon what I would wish to tell you as to what was going on.
OK, but I just want to nail this point that I've been told, and I'm asking you whether this is correct, that Bedfordshire concluded that your officers during that period had misrecorded thousands of crimes. Now, is that yes or no?
There had been a misrecording of some offences. It depends on the word thousands, because we have 130,000 crimes per year, and I think that would be a misinterpretation of the scale of the problem, but there was a problem.
OK. Were you embarrassed by the Bedfordshire report?
Yes, I was, because I take my job very, very seriously. I care for this organisation. I care for the British Police Service generally, and therefore, obviously, it was an embarrassment to me.
This is how embarrassing the report was. The Bedfordshire team found that Notts had found ways of keeping over 9,000 potential crimes out of 1 year's statistics by logging them as minor incidents instead of crime. Then there were the crimes which Notts had claimed to solve, but almost certainly hadn't. For instance, 89 robberies which were cleared up in the city centre, even though none of the supposed victims had ever reported them. Bedfordshire said these were simply fictitious. To write off a further 8,000 crimes, Notts had used questionable confessions from prisoners, few of which survived close scrutiny. Notts officers solved 1,000 cases of shoplifting in one district alone, which mysteriously the shopkeepers had never reported. Most shocking of all, they claimed to have cleared up 98.3% of rapes. Bedfordshire said that was impossible. So was the claim made by one division to have solved twice as many indecent assaults as the public had actually reported.
The police lying to you on that scale, to me, that says everything. It means that the very organisation which you look to and rely upon for honesty are in actual fact, in the areas where they get measured, they are being demonstrably dishonest. And to me, it wasn't the organisation I joined, and not the organisation that I thought had spent 35 years serving well. I don't want to be part of that.
In the space of 1 month, Peter Cole's long police career saw its highest and its lowest point. He was awarded the Queen's Police Medal, the highest honour in the force for distinguished service. Then he resigned.
I'd always known there was fiddling, but then, the older I got and the wiser I got.
He resigned because he couldn't stomach the performance culture which he believed was perverting the way that Nottingham police worked.
The whole problem is they don't think it's dishonest. If you do as I did and point out that, at the end of the day, it's totally and utterly immoral and dishonest, they think you're mad. Because why don't you just join in, pal?
Coles left because he believed his leaders would not act on a report he had written about the force's crime records in the middle of 1996. He intended it should be discussed at a meeting of senior officers. Instead, orders went out to destroy all copies and remove it from the force computer system.
The ends of justice are totally and utterly defeated, and the public who believe that they're getting a service and are paying for that service are actually being cheated. And they've been cheated by the very people that they rely upon to set the standards of honesty and decency in sort of life in general.
Ben! Ben, come on!
Coles retired to the Lake District and took the extraordinary step of making a formal complaint which was referred to the Police Complaints Authority. It meant cutting his ties with the force, but he believed he was justified.
50% of all detected burglaries were either fictitious or wrongly recorded as detected. Now, if you get to that sort of state, I personally believe that you haven't just got a problem, you've got a very, very, very serious problem.
The inquiry delivered its report in secret last year. It cleared senior officers of corruption, but made 59 separate recommendations to improve standards at Nottingham. It said malpractice had happened across the force, and it added that if Peter Coles had not raised his complaints in 1996, it was doubtful whether anything would have been done to stop the abuse.
You'd had 4 years of seeing the statistics which other people say were clearly anomalous and clearly required action. Why did it take you 4 years to get to grips with it?
I'm not sure that it did take us 4 years. We were addressing this as an issue and we were actioning it.
Before July 1996, what did you do before then?
I can't recall.
But Mr. Bailey, you hadn't done anything, had you?
Probably. We had got processes and procedures in place that didn't stand up to the rigours of what you're now telling me, and that's what came out of the Bedfordshire inquiry.
Meanwhile, people in Nottinghamshire must now wonder if the crimes they suffered were dealt with properly or were written off without proper investigation just to improve the figures.
My neighbour across the way came across, knocked on the door and said, "Do you know your garage door's wide open?" And it was in the morning. I said, "No." He says, "You must have left it on." I said, No way. I always lock the garage."
Gone were 2 mountain bikes, but this was one of those crimes the Nottingham police tried to claim as cleared up. Not for long. The confession to this crime was flawed. An investigation revealed that the alleged culprit didn't even know what had been stolen. He mistakenly added a set of golf clubs to the proceeds.
I was quite astounded a couple of years later when 2 very senior officers from Bedfordshire came to investigate the matter. And it was then when I learned that one of them mentioned golf clubs, and I didn't know really what he was talking about.
Ron Stokes now fears that the people who burgled him are at large and still unpunished.
It's rather worrying to think that someone has taken the blame for this that isn't responsible. And if this is a way of just clearing statistics up, I think it's totally wrong.
If you take a national figure, there could be literally thousands or even tens of thousands of victims of crime over, a period of 2 or 3 years who have been, in one sense, cheated of justice, in the sense that somebody's admitted to committing the offence when they actually weren't anywhere near their house at the time.
Very little has been done to stop the crime game, although the Home Office and Audit Commission have recently decided to stop counting prison visit write-offs in next year's statistics. Even so, only a handful of forces have voluntarily abandoned the game. One is Greater Manchester.
Although it was improving our detection rate, it wasn't actually giving any extra sentence to the prisoners, so there was no add-on factors there. The intelligence we gained from those visits was minimal, and the overall benefit to the organisation, or indeed the public of Greater Manchester, was negligible. And we felt that money and those officers' time would be far better directed towards frontline policing and actually preventing more offences or detecting offenders that hadn't been put in prison.
But most police forces are still routinely writing off crimes. Nearly half of all the burglaries that were supposedly detected in England and Wales last year were in fact written off by criminals in custody without fear of punishment. 5 forces cleared up 2/3 of their burglaries this way. In Nottinghamshire, they say they have learnt important lessons and that a lot has changed. Confessions are now supposed to be corroborated. Officers are being told to record crimes accurately, and the figures should be independently audited.
Are you sure you've stamped out the bad practice?
I feel that we have now the policies and processes in place that, as far as possible, ensures that there is no bad practice in the organisation.
But you're not sure that you've stamped out the bad practice?
I would hope that we've stamped out the bad practice. There has been training involved and whatever. And certainly I believe that we've got the processes in place to quickly reveal if there is any bad practice.
But some officers inside Nottinghamshire question how well the new rules apply. Latest figures passed to dispatches show that 2 of the force's 5 divisions have still been relying heavily on confessions by prisoners to clear up key crimes.
I think the British Police Service is the best police service in the world, and by and large, officers are honest. But the problem is, if you actually demonstrably are dishonest in one area, you fall into the trap that many other police forces throughout the world have fallen into, and you become a corrupt organisation.